In 1893, the world seemed to stand still as Ernst Worrell Keely activated his time machine prototype for the first time. Inside his dimly lit workshop in Philadelphia, Keely's hands trembled as the hum of the strange contraption filled the room. Years of secrecy and experimentation had led him to this moment, and as he adjusted the final knobs on his creation, a sense of unease washed over him. The machine stood there like a beast, waiting to be unleashed, glowing with an unnatural energy. The room seemed to close in around him, and the air grew thick with an almost electric charge. Keely knew that he stood on the edge of something that defied everything humanity knew about the laws of time and space. He breathed deeply and in one swift motion activated the machine. Light exploded from the device, blinding him as it tore through the very fabric of reality. A moment of deafening silence followed as the room seemed to freeze in time itself. When the light faded, Keely had disappeared, vanished without a trace. The machine lay silent, its gears still. No sign of struggle, no hint of where Keely had gone. One moment he had stood there on the cusp of history. The next he had simply vanished into nothingness. What had happened to Keely? Had he crossed a line that no one should have crossed? Or had his time machine truly worked? Had he unraveled this mysteries of time itself and paid the price for it? Keely had unlocked a secret that was never meant to be understood, and in doing so he vanished into the abyss of time, leaving only a legacy of unanswered questions and a mystery that would never be solved. The year 1893 marked a time of great change and uncertainty. The streets of Philadelphia were alive with the bustle of industry and progress. The world felt as if it was on the brink of a new age, an age where science and technology could overcome any obstacle, and where the impossible could finally become possible. The Industrial Revolution had transformed cities into hubs of innovation, with new machines and inventions emerging almost daily. People marveled at the inventions of the time. The electric light had begun to replace the gas lamps on the streets, and the telephone had made its mark as a revolutionary device. The future seemed bright and full of promise. Yet amid all this progress, there existed those few individuals whose minds could not be satisfied by the known world. They sought something deeper, something beyond the conventional understanding of the time. Keely stood as one such figure. His lab, tucked away in a small corner of the city, stood as a place where the impossible was pursued, a sanctuary for his experiments that many saw as ludicrous. His machine, built in secrecy and fueled by an obsession that could not be understood, represented the culmination of his dreams. It was a machine that could bend time, a device that could tear apart the very fabric of reality. The scientific community, however, remained skeptical. Keely's theories were seen as too far-fetched, too beyond the realm of possibility. His obsession with sound vibrations, energy fields, and the manipulation of forces that no one understood led to laughter, mockery, and rejection. Keely, however, remained undeterred. He believed in what he had discovered, and he believed that the answers to the universe lay within the vibrations that permeated it. The world moved forward, oblivious to the man who sat on the brink of changing everything. Keely's invention, unknown to the public, remained hidden in the shadows of the city, and yet it promised to break every rule and redefine the very essence of existence. The world seemed unchanged, but Keely, with his obsession, stood ready to shift it forever. From a young age, Keely showed a mind that refused to be bound by the constraints of his time. As a child, he had a fascination with machines and the way they operated, but it was not just their mechanical function that captured his attention. It was the forces that powered them, the invisible forces that could make the world move. His early experiments with sound and vibration were crude but profound in their ambition. He felt there was a connection between sound, light, and energy that no one had yet understood, a bridge between the known and the unknown that could lead to something far greater. Keely devoured books on energy, electricity, and vibration, piecing together theories from the great minds of his time, but his imagination sought to break through their limits. As he matured, he saw the world not as a place governed by fixed rules, but as a place of possibility, an endless frontier waiting to be explored. His mind reached for things beyond the grasp of conventional science, and with each discovery, Keely grew more convinced that he could achieve the impossible. He believed that through the manipulation of sound frequencies and vibrational energy, it would be possible to harness the very forces that held the universe together. These were not just thoughts or fleeting ideas to him. They were visions of a world where time itself could bend, where human limitations could be overcome, and where man could control the very fabric of reality. His work began to consume him, and as he built on the concepts he had learned, he started to create machines that could vibrate with the right frequency, that could manipulate energy fields in ways that defied logic. What began as a simple fascination with the mysteries of the universe had transformed into an obsession, a calling that pushed him further and further away from the world around him. As he worked late into the nights, alone in his workshop, Keely became a man on a mission, a man determined to unlock the secrets of the universe, no matter the cost. His ideas, though brilliant, were rejected by the mainstream scientific community, but that only fueled his drive. His machines, which at first appeared to be nothing more than curious experiments, began to show promise. Yet Keely knew deep down that he was on the edge of a breakthrough, a discovery that would change everything, and he felt that, despite the skepticism of the world, he was destined to reveal it. His obsession grew, and with it, the sense that the world had no idea what was coming. As Keely's work progressed, the resistance from society only grew more intense. His machines, while impressive in their design, seemed to defy the logic of the time, and the scientific community found it difficult to accept such radical ideas. Keely's theories, grounded in the manipulation of sound and vibrational energy, drew ridicule from his peers, many of whom considered him a delusional man obsessed with impossible dreams. Those who had once shown interest in his work now turned away, dismissing him as a charlatan. The world was not ready for a man who believed he could unlock the hidden forces of nature, and the scientific establishment was quick to label him a fool. His discoveries were met with skepticism and disbelief, but it only fueled Keely's resolve. He knew that the rejection was simply a sign that he was ahead of his time, that the world was blind to the possibilities he had discovered. Yet, the loneliness of his pursuit began to take its toll. His laboratory, once filled with excitement and promise, became a place of isolation, where only the hum of machines and the scribbled pages of his journals provided company. As the world laughed at his ideas, Keely found himself in a constant battle to prove his worth, to convince others that he had not lost his mind, but had, in fact, uncovered a truth that had eluded the greatest minds of his time. Friends turned into skeptics, and his name began to be whispered behind his back, not as a visionary, but as a madman. Even his closest supporters began to waver, unsure whether they should continue standing by him as his theories grew more outlandish. As the pressure mounted, Keely's own thoughts began to spiral. He became more consumed by his work, his obsession growing to dangerous levels. He could feel the weight of the world's doubt pressing down on him, and yet he pushed forward, believing that the key to everything lay in his hands. His inventions, though revolutionary, had failed to produce the results he had hoped for, but Keely held firm in his belief that he was on the brink of something extraordinary. The world had rejected him, and yet he refused to let go of his vision. It was a battle between the known and the unknown, between conventional wisdom and the wild frontier of human potential. And as the world turned its back on him, Keely pressed forward, determined to prove that his vision of the future was more than just a dream. The breakthrough came in the most unexpected and frightening of ways. After years of experimentation, Keely had finally succeeded in creating a machine that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of time itself. The device hummed with a strange energy, and for the first time in his life, Keely felt the weight of what he had created. It felt as though the air around him bent and twisted with the power of the machine, as though reality itself began to warp. The vibrations that emanated from the machine were unlike anything Keely had ever felt before. They shook him to his core. And as he watched the machine pulse with life, something inside him told him that this was the moment that would change everything. Keely knew that the machine could open a door to something far beyond human comprehension. In that moment of clarity, he felt the surge of excitement and fear that only the truly extraordinary could bring. The hum of the machine grew louder and louder as the vibrations intensified, shaking the walls of his laboratory. Keely's heart raced. He knew what he was about to do could change the world, but it also carried risks that no one could foresee. He pushed forward, activating the final component of the machine, fully aware of the consequences. A blinding light filled the room, flooding every corner with a pure, intense radiance. For a moment, time itself seemed to bend, as though the very rules of nature were being rewritten. The machine flickered and hummed as if it had reached its limit, and then, in the blink of an eye, it happened. The light abruptly faded, and everything went silent. The machine fell still. Keely, now standing alone in the heart of his creation, felt the sudden weight of the silence. The excitement that had once surged through him now turned to dread. He looked around his lab, but there was no sign of the changes he had hoped for. Nothing had shifted. But as he glanced toward the machine, again he noticed something impossible, a faint shadow in the corner of the room, a shadow that should not have been there. And then the realization hit him like a wave. Keely had opened the door to something that could never be understood, and whatever lay on the other side had found its way into the world. The machine had worked, but at what cost? What had he unleashed? What he had once seen as a breakthrough now felt more like a curse. And in that moment, everything began to fall apart. The breakthrough, the triumph, the fear, they had all collided into something darker than Keely had ever imagined. In the days following his breakthrough, Keely's mind began to fray as the weight of his actions pressed down on him. The world, that had once seemed so full of possibility, now felt like a dark maze, one that Keely could not escape. The machine, though silent and still, left behind a lingering presence that seemed to fill the very air around him. It wasn't just the strange vibrations or the eerie hum that lingered in his workshop. It was the feeling that time itself had been altered, that reality had bent in ways that Keely could not comprehend. Each day he woke to the same oppressive silence, the same sense of dread hanging in the air. His mind began to race, his thoughts becoming increasingly erratic as he wondered what he had truly unleashed. The people around him began to notice the change. Those who had once regarded Keely with a mixture of awe and skepticism now saw a man unraveling before their eyes. His once brilliant, calculating mind seemed to be slipping into madness. Keely began to isolate himself even further, retreating deeper into his lab, obsessively working on the machine that had caused him so much dread. He no longer trusted anyone, not even the few people who had stood by him. His obsession with the machine grew, as did the haunting fear that it might hold answers that he could not bear to face. He scribbled notes in his journals, his handwriting becoming more frantic as he recorded every possible theory, every strange observation, but nothing made sense. The machine, which had once promised to reshape the world, now felt like an anchor, pulling him into the depths of something unknowable. Keely's physical health began to decline as well. His once sharp features became gaunt, his skin pale, and his eyes, those eyes that had once glistened with unbridled excitement, now looked hollow, as if some part of his soul had been drained by the very machine he had built. He could no longer sleep, unable to escape the visions that haunted him. Strange dreams filled his nights, dreams of twisting shadows, of landscapes that shifted and blurred, of voices calling to him from places beyond time. Each time he awoke, he felt as though a part of him had slipped away into those unknown realms. As his mental and physical health deteriorated, the whispers around him grew louder. Those who had once laughed at his theories now began to see the man they once called mad in a different light. They spoke of Keely as someone who had reached too far, a man whose ambition had led him into the very abyss of the unknown. They watched as Keely, now consumed by paranoia, began to shut everyone out. He spoke less and less, and when he did, it was in fragmented sentences, disconnected thoughts that seemed to have little meaning. The machine had done something to him, something far more profound than anyone could understand. Keely could feel the walls closing in, but even as he felt the grip of madness take hold of him, he could not stop. The obsession remained, and with it, the terrifying question, what had he truly opened? As Keely's grip on reality began to slip further, he discovered something that both terrified and fascinated him. Hidden deep within the pages of his journals, he found cryptic notes that he had written in moments of fleeting clarity. The notes spoke of things he had never fully understood at the time. They were fragments of ideas and half-formed theories that now seemed more like warnings. The machine he had built, the one that he had believed would unlock the secrets of time, had opened more than just a doorway. It had torn a rift in the fabric of reality itself. The vibrations from the machine had created ripples that stretched far beyond the laboratory, affecting not just time, but the very essence of existence. The laws of physics seemed to bend and warp as the machine's influence began to spread. Keely could feel it, a heavy, unnatural presence that seemed to watch him from the shadows. A feeling that the boundaries between worlds had been shattered. In the following days, he began to notice strange occurrences, flickers of movement in the corners of his vision, shadows that lingered too long, whispers that filled the silence of his workshop. At first, he dismissed these as mere hallucinations brought on by his exhaustion and paranoia. But the more he witnessed, the more he began to realize that something far darker had followed him home from that moment when he activated the machine. The boundaries between time, space, and reality seemed to collapse and blur. Events from the past, memories that Keely had long buried, began to resurface with terrifying clarity. Faces he thought forgotten appeared in his dreams, and then, disturbingly, in the real world. He would walk the streets of Philadelphia and see people he had never met, but who somehow felt familiar, like echoes of a past that should not have been his. Keely's sense of self began to unravel. He began to question whether the world he inhabited was truly the one he had known. Was he experiencing a breakdown of his mind, or had the machine's influence stretched beyond the physical realm? He could not tell where the machine's effects ended and his own perception began. The thoughts became louder, more insistent, as if something else was speaking through him, using his body as a vessel. He had opened a door, but what had entered? What had he brought back from the unknown? The answers remained elusive, taunting him as they twisted through the veil of his increasingly fractured mind. Keely had built the machine to challenge the very limits of nature, but in doing so, he had invited something far darker into the world. And now, with his sanity slipping away, he found himself standing on the edge of a precipice, one that led into the unknown. Would he ever return to the world he once knew, or had the machine taken him somewhere from which he could never return? As the days stretched into weeks, Keely's life became a series of disjointed moments. He lost track of time, not knowing if it had been days or months since he had last seen daylight. His workshop, once a place of creation and excitement, had become a prison. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow longer, stretching into grotesque shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. Keely had stopped sleeping entirely, haunted by the unrelenting presence of the machine that had once seemed so full of promise. It now felt like a curse, an anchor to a world that had slipped out of his grasp. The strange occurrences that had started so subtly flickers of movement, whispered voices had escalated into something far worse. The faces of people he had never met began to materialize before him, their eyes empty and cold, like reflections in a broken mirror. At first, Keely had thought them to be figments of his fractured mind, but now he began to wonder if the machine had opened a portal to another world, one that bled into his own. Keely became convinced that the boundaries between time and space had dissolved completely. He could no longer trust his own memories, for they began to unravel, slipping through his fingers like sand. The lines between past, present, and future blurred until they merged into a single chaotic moment. In his most lucid moments, Keely understood that something far more sinister had been unleashed, something that had entered through the rift his machine had torn. Yet he had no way of knowing if this was the beginning of his unraveling, or if he was merely a pawn in something much larger than he could comprehend. Desperation consumed him, and the more he sought answers, the further they slipped from his grasp. His work, his life's greatest achievement, had become his prison. The machine that had once offered a glimpse into the future now seemed to hold him trapped in a never-ending nightmare. Then, one fateful night, Keely vanished. He left behind no note, no explanation. His laboratory stood silent, his machines humming softly in the darkness. There was no trace of him, no sign of struggle or violence. It was as though he had simply disappeared, swallowed by the very forces he had sought to control. Some say he was lost to time, dragged into a future or a past where he could never return. Others whisper that the machine had done something far worse, that it had consumed him entirely, leaving nothing but the echoes of his existence. Keely, the man who had defied the natural order, had been consumed by the very thing he had sought to master. His disappearance remains one of the greatest mysteries, a haunting reminder that some forces are too powerful for any human to control. As the years passed, the world seemed to forget about John Keely. His name faded into the background, overshadowed by the rapid advancements in science and technology. Yet those who remembered him, the few who dared to believe in the brilliance of his work, saw something far deeper in his legacy. Keely had unlocked a door that others dared not even approach. His work with vibrations, energy, and time did not end with his disappearance. It echoed through the minds of those who understood its potential. His machine, though left unfinished and abandoned, inspired a generation of inventors and scientists who, whether knowingly or unknowingly, continued to explore the very ideas Keely had pioneered. His concepts of energy fields, sound frequencies, and the manipulation of time laid the groundwork for future breakthroughs in quantum physics, energy manipulation, and even time travel theories. Yet, Keely remained forgotten by most, his name nothing more than a whisper among the vast chorus of history's unsung geniuses. The irony of his legacy lies in the fact that the very world that rejected his ideas, laughed at his inventions, and dismissed his theories would eventually build upon them. The modern world, with its fascination with time travel, energy manipulation, and the unknown, unknowingly owed much to the man who had been branded a madman in his time. His work, though hidden and disregarded, shaped the world in ways that no one could have imagined. In the end, Keely's machine, his obsession, his very genius became the foundation of technologies and concepts that would later define the future. Yet, the world moved forward, indifferent to the man who had been lost in his quest to change it. The true extent of his influence remained hidden in the shadows of time, a legacy that few understood and fewer still acknowledged. The question remained, had Keely's disappearance been the result of his own ambitions, or had he truly stumbled upon something too dangerous for the world to ever understand? His machine had promised the future, but left only silence in its wake. And so, the questions surrounding John Keely's disappearance linger like a dark cloud over history, unanswered and unresolved. Did he truly unlock the secrets of time, or had his mind simply fractured under the weight of his own ambition? What had he truly found in that machine, the one that hummed with a power beyond comprehension? Had Keely simply vanished into another time, never to return, or had the machine swallowed him whole, leaving no trace behind? The theories swirl, each one as haunting and unsettling as the last, but the truth remains just out of reach, like a shadow slipping through the cracks of reality. Keely's disappearance became a legend, a warning, and a puzzle that no one could solve. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the world seemed still, one could almost hear the faint hum of that machine, like the heartbeat of a forgotten dream, calling out from the edges of time itself. What if Keely had been the first to peer beyond the veil of what we understand, the first to unlock a door that no one should have ever opened? Could it be that the answers to the mysteries of time, energy, and existence lie somewhere in the wake of his disappearance? And if they do, are we truly prepared to face the consequences of those answers? Or are some doors best left unopened, some truths too dangerous to uncover? The questions will remain, and John Keely, the man who dared to bend time, will forever haunt the edges of history. His story a reminder that some mysteries are far too great for the world to comprehend.